Hola, mi nombre es Karen Méndez y formo parte de la comunidad de Drupal Costa Rica. Estoy aquí para extenderle una cordial invitación al DrupalCamp 2021. Este año también se hará de modalidad virtual en la plataforma de hopping.com, donde contaremos con talleres y charlas de nivel intermedio, avanzado y básico para que puedas aprender más sobre Drupal. También habrá un chat en línea para que puedan consultar todas sus dudas con los expertos. Muchas gracias a los patrocinadores de este año.
DrupalCamp Costa Rica 2021 con la plataforma Hopping.
No olviden visitar los stands de nuestros patrocinadores y recuerden visitar nuestro sitio web DrupalCamp.cr.
So I'll start it then, I guess.
Yeah, sounds good.
Fantastic. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Best Practices. Best Practices for Scaling a Drupal Migration. Next slide. This was a 3-hour presentation back in September that Doris and I did. We have cut this down to 15 minutes. We actually did this for 20 minutes at DrupalCon Europe, but that was way too short. So, but 50 minutes seems to be the perfect time. So I think that's it. Let's ready, set, and let's go. My name is Eric. I am from Kentucky, USA, and I work for Pantheon. I'm a customer onboarding manager. And with me, I've got.
Oh, sorry. I was supposed to speak and I passed the slide. Hi, I am Larissa Spinach. I'm a Drupal developer and trainer at Evolving Web. Nice to be here and see you all another year. Let's get started.
This talk is an overview for a large-scale migration from the University of Waterloo in Toronto, Canada. This is a lessons learned from moving over 950 Drupal 7 sites to Drupal 9. And we're also attempting to answer the most popular question that came out of that 3-hour webinar. How do you estimate something like this? And so hopefully some of the overviews and some of the tactics and strategies that we're going to show you that Evolving Web and University of Waterloo used, hopefully will give you some ideas in helping you estimate as well. We're going to be covering a lot of different things, and it's all going to relate back to the 5 stages of planning. We're not going to get into the minutia of migration, the whole ETL process, and we will be touching on a couple of the modules, but we won't get into code at all. This is really more of a high-level aspect of it, and covering the 5 stages of planning. Reviewing what is to be migrated, how it is structured, or is it really needed? Planning. Breaking this large migration into smaller groups, how to break it into smaller groups, what to look for, looking for commonalities within the content structure between all the sites, and working with the group owners on scheduling. Configuring, this is where the migration toolkit is built, and Migrate, this is the actual process of the migration to Drupal 9, and then at the final end, testing. This is not by far the only testing. There's other testing that takes place prior to this, but the big testing at the end, the UAT, the user acceptance testing, that's where the blessing is given and everything's fully migrated. So we start off with review. We start looking at some important self-reflections, things to consider in terms of timing, budget, and if outside help is needed. Is your team do they already know Drupal 9? Is there a lot of learning on the job that needs to take place, or is everybody coming to the table with the appropriate skills? And that's definitely going to affect any type of assessment you want to when you start looking at these sites. For Waterloo, they broke it into 5 to 15 sites per group. So 950 divided by 15. I think there was something. What was it? 30? Because it wasn't all 15. How many groups were there? You remember, Gerza?
Yeah. The thing is, it wasn't. I don't know exactly number because every time, yeah, it is still running, And also because the groups were not always of the same size. So for example, a
Right.
pilot group was of 9 sites, but then it kept changing.
Yeah. So there's
So,
a
yeah.
lot of fluctuation. What you're going to find is that there's a lot of fluctuation that would happen along the way. There's a lot of give and take, a lot of changes. Reviewing on what is to be moved, and who was going to do what. For Waterloo, Evolving Web built the migration kit. Waterloo did the actual migration and the theme building, and then Pantheon provided the tools for the hosting and the tool. We'll cover that in a little bit. Notice I said Waterloo handled the theme building. We're not really going to talk about themes today. Going from the HTML template to Twig, or going from panels to layout builder. These are whole new beasts, and there's a lot of complexity there. Don't have a lot of time to cover all that. Am I still on the same page?
I think I moved.
Okay, no, that's right. I'll go to the next one. That's good.
Okay.
That's good. One thing to look at is, will it migrate cleanly? Reviewing the complexity of the sites, looking at the content types, looking at the fields, looking at some custom modules. I mean, what modules are going to be able to move over? Are they contributed modules ready for Drupal 9? Do they need to be worked? Are they custom modules that were built in-house? Do those need to be upgraded to run in the Symfony framework within OOP? And there are tools for this: module assessment, of course, module upgrader. There's different Drupal tools that we'll talk about. But there are tools available, but you still have to get into the nitty gritty. You still need to get into the trenches and make the changes. And that's where that original question is: are you coming to the table? Is your team coming to the table with the skills necessary to do this right off the bat, or is this an on-the-job training? Theme assessment, of course. There's no clean migration for the themes. There are tools that help, but in the end, again, it's in the trenches.
Yeah. So as part of all of this, well, as Eric was saying, this is not a talk about how do we migrate. It is instead of how do we plan a migration project. So as part of all these review that Eric has just said, of like checking out what do we need and what do we have, it might be easy to do it in one single site, but what happens when you have thousands or tens, dozens of sites? Well, it gets hard to do. So in terms of large scale migration, something that we need to think about is that we need to create an inventory of all the sites, all the modules, all the themes, all the layout techniques that we are using. Okay, so in this stage of the planning, or in this stage of the migration project, what we need to find out is how the sites relate to each other in regards to the modules that they share, the themes that they share, the content, and how is all that laid out. We also need to find out how the sites differ, because it is not all of them are exactly the same. They will have some differences, and we need to find out what are those differences, because we need to move that over too. But most importantly, we need to be watching always for representative candidates. Again, in terms of large-scale migrations, we need to find that out. What sites can be part of our pilot group? Something really important here is that when we are working with a lot of websites, and we need to do the migration for all of them, we need to divide and conquer. So we need to make sure that we start working with a small group, that we can get that to the finish line, and then we can move on with the following group. So that first group can be our pilot group, and for creating that pilot group, we need to be watching for the representative candidates that are going to be part of that group. So something that can help us here is think about them as the sites that have common attributes across the group. These are what we will test against also. These representative candidates can be laid out in different ways. And what we can say is that what they should have, or how we can choose them, is depending on what are the common features they have. We need to make sure that the sites that are going to be part of that pilot group represent all of the variations from all of our websites. And these variations are in terms of the content types, the field types, the taxonomies, the views that they have, the layout techniques, the modules, the themes, all of that. But also another term that can help us here is complex data migration. And this is what happened in the case of the University of Waterloo. For them, the pilot group, as we said before, was made of 9 websites. And those 9 websites were representing the more complex migrations that we needed to do. So the priority and what we used to choose what was going to be part of that pilot group was that we needed to try to cover all the possible cases of the more complex data migration. So in this case, 90% of that was related to custom tags in the content. They had a big number of tags, and for each of those tags, there was a different migration strategy. So they chose 9 sites that included all those different set of tags. And that was a pilot group. Why that was important and needed? Well, and useful, sorry. It was very useful because once we have done the migration of those 9 sites, the rest of the sites are quite easier because the bulk of the job has been done already. So that's why it is a good idea to work with these pilot groups. Once we have finished this review stage where we do the site audit and we find out what are the representative candidates and we define what's going to be like or what can be part of our pilot group, we enter into the following stage, which is the planning stage. And for doing this planning, we need to consider a couple of things. So for example, we need to plan the migration method. And this means whether we are going to do an upgrade style migration and pull in the configuration and content, or whether we are going to be writing custom migrations. That is something we need to find out. We also need to find out the type of migrations in terms of what is going to be migrated manually and what is going to be migrated automatically. We need to plan out the migration for each content type that we have, or for each content entity type that we might have, because it is not just nodes, it's also users, it's also redirects and aliases and taxonomy terms and any other entity that we might have. So we need to find that out. How is that mapping happening? Something else that we should be looking at in this planning stage is, are there tricky elements for this migration? Because sometimes these tricky elements will take a lot of time. So we need to find out if there are tricky elements and how long it will take to migrate each of them. You might wonder, okay, what are tricky elements? Well, these tricky elements can be, for example, the redirects, aliases, paragraphs, things related to meta tags, workbench moderation. If we have workbench moderation enabled in our Drupal 7 site, then it might be something else to consider when we are doing the migration. Whether we have web forms, a scheduler, panelizer, all those things may increase the effort and the time that we need to put into finishing the migration. I'm sorry. Something else is we can decide when we're doing these migration projects, we can decide what to omit, because doing a migration might be a good opportunity to do a cleanup for a site and fix mistakes on the previous time that we had to do some architecture decisions. So that's part of what we can do. We can decide if we want to omit some revisions, comments, the moderation status. Maybe we don't want to migrate old events. Maybe we don't want to migrate unpublished nodes, all that kind of stuff. Here is where we are going to decide what will happen with it. And finally, we need to plan for new content from non-Drupal sources. Here we're talking about migrations from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9, but it might be the case that you still have to migrate something from a CSV file or XML file. Migrations can be pretty big, so we need to find out what is it exactly that we need to do and plan for it. To do all of this, there are a couple of artifacts that are pretty useful and can help us a lot on finding all of this out. One of them is the module assessment, and the other one is the data transfer table. You can see here these two modules, upgraded status and entity reports. They are basically Drupal contributed modules that allows us to it makes it easier for us to build these two artifacts. In the case of the module assessment, this is basically just one simple spreadsheet that has the list of all the modules that you have in your Drupal 7 sites and the status of them for Drupal 9. this is helpful because that way you know what you need to do. Again, this is part of the review and planning stage, because you need to find out what is the current status of your site. Like in this document, you will put whether the module doesn't exist anymore for Drupal 9, whether the module has been replaced for something else, and so on. Because, you know, there might be some modules that are not needed anymore because the functionality is now available in core. For example, link or internationalization or views or block menu, they were all country modules for Drupal 7, but now they are part of core. We may have some cases where the modules have been successfully ported to Drupal 9, like, for example, path auto and meta tag. We may have the case of modules that its functionality has been replaced by something else. And a good example for this is, for example, organic groups. Organic groups is still not as stable for Drupal 9, but we do have the module group, so that helps. We may have modules that are not available for Drupal 9 at all, and then we need to find out an alternative method, and that will sum up to the time and effort that we need to put into doing the migration. So that's something else that can happen. And at the end, we always need to identify modules that are used for content storage, because they manage content that we need to migrate to Drupal 9. So this is the kind of things that we need to find out in here. And as you can see, in here you can we will have like that column for the status, a column for whether the thing is installed or not on your Drupal site, some notes about what is the status for it later on. If we have something that maybe is already ported, but it is not stable, or there is a beta version or something like that, this is the kind of things that we will need to do. The module upgrade status allows us to find out a lot of this information. So we can use that one to build this tool and then work with it. The other artifact that I was telling you was the data transfer table. And this data transfer table is basically just one, it's another spreadsheet where you can put the mapping between the things that you had in Drupal 7 and how they will be done in Drupal 9. And here you can have multiple sheets. And in the first one, you can have an overview like the one that you're looking at in the screen right now, where you can put all the different type of entities that you have. What is the machining in Drupal 7? How many items are there in that site? What is the translation mechanism that is used for them? And then how you're mapping that to Drupal 9. Maybe sometimes are not going to be migrated, so you will need to put it in here. Maybe sometimes are going to be done automatically. Some others are going to be done manually, and then you need to put it in here. This is the example of the overview page, but you can also have one more page for each content type, so or each entity type. So let's say that you are migrating articles. You can have another sheet with the information of all the fields for the article page and how it was all in Drupal 7 and how it is mapped to your new Drupal 9. And this is a great tool because it allows you to write the migration in a better way and know exactly what is happening with everything and what is the status. Something that I like to say is that this document is a living document. So it is not that you just create it in a planning stage and you leave it like that. No, you actually keep updating it during the whole process and you keep consulting it. So it's pretty useful. For this one, a module that helps us a lot is the entity reports, because it gives you a whole report about what are the entities that you have, what are the fields, where are they used, how many items are for each thing. So it's pretty cool and help you a lot to build this. When we talk about the scaling the planning stage, well, the things that we need to consider is that we need to consider and do or plan how it's going to be the custom module migration, because sometimes we will have to port some modules. We need to have the contributed module assessments so that we know what things we had in Drupal 7 and how they are, what is their situation and compatibility status for Drupal 9. We need to have the content types and field mapping. We need to plan for the theme rebuild. We need to plan and identify what are going to be the test scenarios for our migration. And here with the test scenarios, there's something pretty important, and it is that You saw before that we had 5 stages, and the last one is testing. But the testing is not just there. We need to be testing. We need to be thinking about testing since the first stages. So here, when we talk about identifying test scenarios, that's what we are talking about. What is going to be tested later? So, for example, if you have a Drupal 7 site where you have files embedded in the body field, you know there are some tags attached to it. Like there are going to be some media tags in the body field as markup, and then you need to transform that into another type of tag in your Drupal 9 site. So that is something that might be a test scenario. You can find out what is it that you need to do there. Like you need to test that effectively the images that were embedded in the body field are embedded in the body field in the Drupal 9 site once it is migrated. So here, since this stage, you need to be thinking about that. Apart from identifying test scenarios, we need to define a primary upstream, and Eric will tell you all about it in a couple of minutes. But yeah, at the end, the primary upstream is going to be like this, the configuration or the site that will be shared between all of the sites that you have. So it is like all the configuration modules, themes that is going to be shared between everything. We need to create a pilot group with the representative sites, and our recommendation is to do it between 5 and 15 sites. Don't work with groups bigger than that, because then it gets pretty heavy. So there's that. And the other thing is to roll out in phases. We need to plan for rolling out in phases. We cannot pretend that we're going to migrate everything at the beginning, or that we're going to work with everything at the same time. It will not happen. So we need to schedule not only for development and migration teams, but also for stakeholders. So all of this comes together into all this planning stage.
So there was a talk about custom upstreams. This is a start state for your Drupal 9 site. This one upstream will hold all the content fields, all the content types, all the users, the roles, the menus, the shared modules, the shared themes, everything off of this one upstream, so that every time you spool up a new Drupal site, a new upstream is, it's exactly the same, because it's all coming off the same start state. Now, they can be changed. As you make an update to that upstream, it'll make changes to the upstreams that were used prior, and everything that's from then on. Every upstream will be the same as well. Which gets us into Pantheon development tools. Fantastic, thank you. So the first thing I want to talk about is multi-dev. These, in terms of Git, the dev branch is the master branch for the Git repo. Test and live are tags, but we also have branches. For branches, we call them multi-devs in Pantheon, and these are fully independent containers for the database and assets. You can spool up a branch, spool up a multi-dev, and it's a fully functioning independent site. This is great for feature testing, for updates. In fact, it's what Pantheon's Autopilot uses for doing the automatic updating. It'll spool up a multi-dev called Autopilot, do the visual regression test, and then deploy that to dev, or deploy it all the way to live if you want it to. It's a great tool. Terminus, as you're clicking around in Pantheon, feel free to go to Pantheon, open up your own account, get your own sandbox, fully free. You can create a site, and anything you can do in the dashboard, you can do from the command line. Use the Terminus tool, which opens up a host of possibilities in terms of automation, which is extremely important with a large migration like this. Quicksilver, it's a tool that we have. These are scripted actions that happen with events that happen, activity that happens on the platform, including triggering outbound events like notifications and clearing cache. My previous employment, every time one of my front-end people pushed up code to dev, I got a Slack message. Anytime somebody pushed the database to live, I got a Slack message It's pretty nice. And any PHP script I want to run, every rush command I can run through Quicksilver. So again, it helps with the automation. And again, custom upstreams, the pre-configured templates to serve as start states for your sites. Just a little diagram here on the workflow for Waterloo. Locally, they had a GitLab, which they used as their repo, and used their GitLab CI to build and test locally. Once it went through approved through the test there, it went into the Pantheon upstream, and they could push it directly up to the different sites, or they could run it through Jenkins and Terminus. And they could also set up test sites on the multi-devs that I mentioned before.
Yeah, so here what I'd like to highlight is that in the case of the University of Waterloo, we had to create this custom upstream because it was the best option for everything. At the end, this custom upstream for them, what it had was all the themes, all the modules, all the configuration needed for all of the sites, like for the 950 sites. And then we will basically just have certain configuration on each site that will decide what modules were going to be enabled and what not, what configuration was needed and what configuration was not needed. So at the end, it's custom upstream, and there was only one custom upstream for the 950 sites, and it was shared between all of them. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. With just one custom upstream, we could deliver more than 950 websites. So pretty cool. I say this because this custom upstream is going to be like the base for our migration, right? And when we get to this stage, we are talking about content migration. When we are in these migrate and test stages, we're talking about specifically content migration. Now we are not talking about the content types that need to be created or the fields and the mappings. No, all of that had happened already when we were creating the custom upstream. Okay, so all that is structure and all that foundation in order for us to be able to add nodes and add content and store content in our site, all that was part of that custom upstream effort. So when we get here, that's what we're talking, content migration. And when we are doing the content migration for hundreds of sites, these two stages that you see here, the migrate and test, they are not really sequential. It doesn't make sense to have them sequential. They have to be very integrated. We can say that it is a cyclical and interactive process. And we need to have a lot of emphasis on the testing. We can say that as many times as we want, and it will never stop being true. There's a lot of testing that needs to go into these kind of migrations. If we talk specifically about the migrate part, here we're talking about creating the migration scripts, okay? And this means migrating over content, mapping references, making sure that we have the right extended aliases, all that stuff, right? But we're not only talking about the coding of that part. We are also talking about doing the content freeze so we can do the final migration. And even the final migration, like for now when we are doing deployment and everything, that part is part of this stage too. Okay. When we talk about the testing, we need to think, when should we test? And that's probably a question that we get a lot. But the answer is actually always. So we said, yeah, it is before and during and after the process. It is always. When we talk about testing before, what we are talking about is what we mentioned in the planning stage of identifying test scenarios. That means that we need to identify and define what is going to be tested. What do we need to test for this project? When we talk about during, we're talking about the creation of the PHP unit test and the BHAT test and all the visual regression that we need and all the custom scripts and all of that. One cool tool for this is called Diff. It compares the whole output for our sections for our sites, and it allows us to catch some bugs. So it basically just compares the markup of the site in like the production side and the migrated side to make sure that it is all the same. So that's something that we could considered there. And when we talk about migrating after, now here we're talking about doing the user acceptance testing phase. In the case of Waterloo, they had to prepare people from each site to be able to do this UAT phase for each of the sites. So there is that. It is important to have the QA team involved since early stages. We cannot pretend to go do all the process, migrate the thing, and then say, hey, you have here the UAT, go and test all of this. No, we should always be, we should be a very cohesive team and have everything together since the beginning. Something important here is that as much as we don't want to have anything change between the Drupal 7 and the Drupal 9 side when we do the migration, like we can keep most of it, but there will be changes. So it is very important to have communication with everyone, with all of the stakeholders since the beginning, and to iterate over the process so that it is easier to have a successful project. In the case of Waterloo, the process was like this. We developed one migration kit module, or the migration toolkit. That's how we called it. And this migration toolkit module was basically one module that had all the migration scripts needed for the 950 websites. And how was that created? It might seem crazy, and it is, but the idea here was not work with the 950 sites at like one by one. Instead, the University of Waterloo created one single Drupal 7 site to rule them all. What does that mean? Basically, they had this one Drupal 7 site, which was not part of the 950. It was like something created specifically for making it easy to create this migration toolkit module. And in that site, they placed all type of elements that we could have found in any of the sites. So if there was one site that had a blog functionality, that blog functionality will go to this Drupal 7 master site. If there was one other site that had, I don't know, articles, or I don't know, whatever they could have, they public releases, or I don't know, all of that will be in this Drupal 7 site, okay? And then when we were developing, that was the only database that we were dealing with, okay? So instead of having to put one database, test with that one, and then get the other one and test with that one, and so on, we will just work with one that already had all the structures needed for the migration. So that was key for this. And it was possible to create that based on all the work that we have previously done about the review and the planning. So something that we did was create all the migration plugins for this. And then for every single plugin that we created, there is a test, an automated test inside of the module. So we know that if we need to go and change something, it will be tested automatically, and we will not have like big issues or regressions with what we are doing. We will not be breaking something without knowing. The test suite will come to the rescue. Once we have all of these in place, we will be adding this toolkit to the custom upstream that we mentioned before. And then the same module was distributed to the 950 sites, to all the sites that we had. It was distributed to them. This module was pre-generic, right? Because as you can see, it is based on all the content for all the module, all the websites. But as much as it was generic, it could still read site-specific configuration from somewhere, and that somewhere was usually the settings PHP. So, for example, if we needed to migrate files, and well, they will be migrated from different URLs, right? All the sites had different domains. So at the end, if we need to bring something from there, we could just configure what is the URL that we want to take on from the settings PHP. The module will read it from there and will apply the configurations as it needs. So that's something cool there. There were some helper modules that allows us to order and classify everything that we had. One of them was Migrate Scanner. Migrate Scanner was a module created by one of our colleagues at Evolving Web. He's called Ivan I can't say the last name, but Ivan is great, and he's even one of the top contributors to Drupal. He created this module, and it allows us to have all the different kind of plugins separated in a very useful way. So Migrate Scanner was key to the success of the project, and we also were using Migrate tools and Migrate Plus. So yeah, that's part of it. So we have talked a lot today, but we have here one small, or maybe not small, but one pretty nice graph that help us to understand the whole process. Okay, so in the case of the University of Waterloo, and this can be extrapolated to any other case that you have, even if you have 50 sites or something like that, you can still apply these things. The idea of doing these large scale migrations is that you will have a list with all your sites, right? And based on it, you will be trying to find the intersection between them. These will be what we were talking about before, like the commonalities, how they differ. We will find out what are the things that we need to work with for migrating to Drupal 9. And based on that intersection, let's say, we will build the migration toolkit. Let's say that intersection is like the Drupal 7 master site that we had in our site, for building the migration toolkit. Once we build this migration toolkit, which means we are creating all the plugins for the migrations and also all the tests for it, we will be ready, we will have our module ready, and we will be able to put it inside of the custom Upstream so that it is distributed for all of the sites. That is one part of the process, but then the other part of your process is working with groups. So we will create our pilot group, we will create end groups depending on how many sites you have. Remember, it's a good idea to not migrate everything at once. So that's why we will work first with our pilot group. And this pilot group and the subsequent group can be between 5 and 15 sites each. Again, in Waterloo, it was 9, the first group, and that's what we worked with. When you get your first group, what you will do, and actually not just with the first one, with all of the groups that you work with, the idea is that you are going to start by building the Drupal 9 site. And this, you will do it by pulling the custom Upstream, which will be like your template for everything. And once you have it built, you will do or execute the test suite from the migration toolkit. If that test suite fails, the next step is to actually go back and try to fix the migration toolkit. But if it works perfectly and it passes, what corresponds is to actually do a group content freeze. So you will schedule a freeze for all the sites that were part of this group, and then you will actually execute the migration. So you will do the migration of this, you will deploy everything. And when we are talking about this migration and deployment, we're not just talking about the automated stuff. We also talk about doing the manual steps for these migrations, because in all the migrations, we have manual steps sometimes. So there is something. Once you have done that, we can pass to UAT. If it fails, we keep working with the same group. And if it passes, then we are free to go to the following group. This was the whole process followed in the case of the University of Waterloo. All the elements that you see here in that yellow area, those are the steps that were executed in the Pantheon site. So the building of the Drupal 9 sites was done directly in Pantheon by pulling the custom option, which is actually also part of Pantheon, so that should be in the yellow area too. But yes, all of this is done there, and with certain integrations with Terminus and Quicksilver, we can get more information automatically to know how the process went. So this is part of all the things done for this project.
One of the hiccups that Waterloo was having in the migration is they were attempting to migrate into the dev environment, and it was testing out. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the structure, the infrastructure here at Pantheon, to give you an idea of how to get past that, and also explain a little bit. as to how Pantheon works. We are a serverless container operation, and when you sign up for a free sandbox account, which I mentioned before, you'll get one PHP container, one database container, one asset container, and all the PHP container will be the code will be controlled by Git, and you'll have a site fully ready to go. When you initialize it to live and you start doing marketing, you start pushing it, start getting more and more traffic, you can go from a sandbox test site to a site that handles tens of millions of page views just with a few flicks and switches. There's no reconfiguring memory or reconfiguring the server or anything like that. It's just flipping on containers, which leads to the original issue that Waterloo was having, and they switched to loading to the live environment instead of to the dev environment, because the live environment had more resources available to it. As you can see here in this case, before you, there's 4 application containers. All the code is controlled by Git. All the code, all the structure, all the applications are watched by New Relic, and then there's a backup to the redundant database and the redundant database, Redis object cache, Solr indexing, and of course the assets directory or container. So if you're doing a large migration into Pantheon, you might want to look at just doing migration directly into live, so you don't run into that issue. So we've given quite a lot of information today, and one of the key things we wanted to stress is how to estimate this. We don't know. One of the first questions we had when we did the original webinar was, hey, I've got 40 sites, 4 different languages. How much time is this going to take? We have no idea. We can't see your site. We don't know the complexity, but hopefully we've given some tools here that will help estimate this. And we want to give you an overview of what's being done right now. To set the stage, Evolving Web. Well, actually, you know what? Let's back up just so everybody knows. Evolving Web did the planning and development of the toolkit, and it wasn't just one development. It's been an ongoing development of refining of the toolkit as the migration is done by the university. The university does the actual migration, the front end development, and Pantheon is the build tools and hosting, which I mentioned before. And with that, let's take a look at the timeline. In October, a year ago, the planning began. In January of 2021, to begin the development of the migration toolkit. In April, the first release of the toolkit, and then over the summer, various releases of that toolkit as the migration progressed. And then 1 year ago, or actually 1 year later, October 21, the migration is still in progress. So over 950 sites from D7 to D9. It's taken well over a year of planning and migration, development and migration. You can see that this is a fairly large endeavor. So we have a few things to keep in mind as we're going through this. The big one is plan, right? Understand all the different sites that you're going to be moving and looking for those commonalities and creating pilot groups. It'll give you a good view. Plan for QA, plan for a lot of QA, whether it's PHP unit testing or visual regression, or most important, working with your stakeholders of the sites, because they're the ones that are going to be doing the final UA testing. And so they need to you need to communicate with them, communicate early, communicate often, and to make them a part of the process. Create one migration module to rule them all. And this will help you standardize. This will help keep things under one tent. And then with that, divide and conquer. Take all your sites, divide them into chunks, and that's where the planning comes in. It's going to show you what groups and how to divide them up. And then automate as much as you can, because just because you run the migration doesn't mean you're going to be done. You probably have to go back and rerun the migration. Or if migration is successful, you want to run it across multiple sites. Again, automation is going to help you.
Yeah, something interesting that was automated in this case was that even the creation of the sites, that was also automated. Like we didn't really have to go to Pantheon and create one thing and then the other and then the other and the other. No, it didn't happen like that. There was just one script that will make use of Terminus and all those Pantheon tools to be able to create all of the sites, pulling the custom upstream, enabling the things that we needed, and all of that was automated. And why that's needed? Because we don't want to go and do all of those steps 950 times. So yeah, it's cool. and all of these were lesson learned during all this process. So if you are interested in more training about this, we have some trainings coming up. These two, Drupal Advanced Theming and Atomic and Molecular Design with Drupal, are going to be starting on November 16 and December 14. But we also have some module development trainings. In the second one, in the advanced module development, we will have a section for migrations too. So you're invited to go to evolvingweb.ca/training and look at it.
We've also got training for Drupal 9 coming up. If you're going to be doing migration for a lot of D7 and D9 sites, and you've got a lot of users in D9 that are new to D9, we have a 3-hour getting started with Drupal 9 on Pantheon. It's a whole worksheet on setting up a sandbox, setting up a Drupal 9 site, going through the basic configuration, creating content, creating custom content, working with views and taxonomies and stuff. It's great for somebody who wants to get their feet wet in this, or get their feet re-wet, as the case may be. So give us a look. Go to Pantheon, do a search for getting started with Drupal 9.
And keep the conversation going. I don't know if you have any questions. Those are our Twitter handles, so you can talk to us there. And I don't know if anyone has any question. It has been great to be with you today.
Yes, this has been fantastic. My first time in Costa Rica, and I'm not really there yet, but I am coming. I am going to come down there.
In spirit, you're also here.
I showed a video of that baby sloth rescue place in Costa Rica to my 7-year-old daughter, and she wants to move there now and work there.
Oh, so you'll have
coming
to come.
down. I'm coming down.
There's nothing else to do. You'll have to come. Yeah. Okay then.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Hola, mi nombre es Karen Méndez y formo parte de la comunidad de Drupal Costa Rica. Estoy aquí para extenderle una cordial invitación al DrupalCamp 2021. Este año también se hará de modalidad virtual en la plataforma de hopping.com, donde contaremos con talleres y charlas de nivel intermedio, avanzado y básico para que puedas aprender más sobre Drupal. También habrá un chat en línea para que puedan consultar todas sus dudas con los expertos. Muchas gracias a los patrocinadores de este año.
DrupalCamp Costa Rica 2021 con la plataforma Hopping.
Mi nombre es Solimar Vargas y hoy te quiero hablar de WeKnow. Somos una empresa que tiene su base en Costa Rica y trabajamos con desarrolladores distribuidos alrededor de Latinoamérica. Nuestro core de negocio es Drupal y nos gusta el trabajo remoto, la posibilidad de explorar permanentemente lugares y de que te puedas mover como profesional continuamente como un nómada y cumpliendo tu trabajo como buen profesional. Actualmente tenemos diferentes búsquedas abiertas, así que esperamos por ti y porque te vengas a sumar a este gran equipo. WeKnow, una empresa para que todos podamos construirnos juntos y seguir siendo quienes deseamos ser como personas en el lugar donde elijamos estar.
We wish we could be there in person this year for this amazing and awesome Drupal camp. Because we're missing out on talking to everyone face to face, we want to share a little bit about our passion for Drupal at phase 2 and how, in partnership with WeKnow, We make influential digital products that have a global reach. Ask folks at the booth for more information on how we can work together in the future. Thanks for coming by.
I am an enormous fan of Drupal the technology, but I think the thing that I owe most to being here right now, talking to you, is this group of people. Truly this community of wonderful, welcoming, warm, brilliant human beings. And I can remember very clearly the moment where I realized that this is what I want to do with my life. And that's a big moment, and it was at a DrupalCon. And so I hope that maybe for one of you out there who are thinking about doing this or thinking about whether or not you can be a developer, give yourself a shot.
Phase 2 y WeKnow han fortalecido su alianza en los últimos años. Juntos, traemos proyectos innovadores y de impacto a desarrolladores fuera de los Estados Unidos. Desarrolladores en Costa Rica y muchos otros países, desde México hasta Argentina. Gracias a esta profunda relación, sumarse a nuestro equipo te brinda una gran oportunidad para desarrollar tus habilidades y ejecutar proyectos de gran visibilidad y profundo significado.
I've been a part of Phase 2 for 12 years, and one thing I'd love to share with you is that one of Phase 2's core values is to share knowledge openly. And this is always aligned with the spirit of contribution found in the Drupal community. Now, when someone thinks of Drupal, they immediately think of the wealth of contributed modules and solutions it has to offer. But the real source of Drupal's staying power has always been the community. Drupal is powered by people all over the globe, including many contributions made by the people here at Phase 2. For 2 decades, Phase 2 and Drupal have grown and evolved together. In the early days, Drupal and Phase 2 found a way to work with nonprofit organizations, local communities, and even charitable activism. It was a way to bring people with a common goal and purpose together. Now, as Drupal grew into a true enterprise platform solution, it really never forgot its roots in that early spirit of contribution. And neither have we here at Phase 2. From hosting Drupal meetups, speaking at DrupalCons and camps all over the globe, writing blog posts of solutions to complicated problems, contributing core patches and new modules. We relish the opportunity to give back to a community that has given so much to others. Drupal is a big part of what we do here at Phase 2, and we value the collaboration and sense of community that is part of Drupal's identity. Drupal in Phase 2 recognize the importance of contributing back to all the communities that we know and love. Mentorship, guidance, code contributions, sharing ideas. These are just some of the ways how tech unites us and helps us to come together as one big community.
No olviden visitar los stands de nuestros patrocinadores y recuerden visitar nuestro sitio web DrupalCamp.cr.